Good morning subscribers and welcome back. So today I'm putting together the final A-level video. I've already done a thoughts video for the micro paper, one for the macro paper, and of course now we come finally to the themes paper, the synoptic paper. And as I stressed at the beginning of my micro and macro papers, these are simply my thoughts, my best guesses really, as to what might be the likely topics this summer. But obviously by no means would I advise you to just simply focus on these topics. That would not be clever, would it, Max? Got a couple of students in here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so I think the first thing to say here, and I hope you can read this document, if not I'll put a link down below and you can download this along with all the other resources from the Dropbox link which I've already posted on the two other videos. But the first thing to say is that of course the A-level specification is so enormous that it's not possible for the board to assess everything in micro in paper 1, everything in macro in paper 2. And hence we have this sort of catch-all paper, paper 3, where the board then try to assess bits of micro which were not touched upon in paper 1, and bits of macro which were not touched upon in paper 2. So do bear that in mind. And I would certainly advise you, once you've done papers 1 and 2, and I'll maybe do this for you as well, have a look at the key content and then look and see, well, which areas of micro and macro were not assessed, because they're probably more likely then to be assessed in the paper 3. You can sort of work that out by process of elimination. Okay, next point. 30 multiple choice questions to do. Have a look at the international board papers which are in the link provided. They are much more difficult than any of the multiple choice questions you'll get. So if you can do those papers, you'll have no problemo with the multiple choice questions on your particular script. No problemo, Max, no problemo. So I'm just going to recap June 2017 paper, June 2018 paper, and then we'll have a little think about what might appear this time. So in 2017, with our multi-choice obviously, and in the case study, it's interesting this, I didn't really notice this until I sat down to analyse them in more detail. The emphasis on the June 2017 paper is very much micro. So it focused on the housing market, it looked at house price growth relative to earnings growth. There was a lot of quite simple supply and demand analysis in it. And then there was a little bit more of a sort of macro style question with regard to infrastructure and high-speed rail HS3. Now the question, so that was the case study, and then the questions focused upon scarcity. Comparing data always appears on these papers, so comparing data in charts. So make sure that you can do that, make sure that you do always compare, so X is higher than Y, or Y is lower than X, or X is so many % greater than. Make sure that you do that comparison, don't just state the numbers. Next set of questions were about the affordability of housing, the elasticity of supply of housing. Big question about whether or not there was market failure in the housing market. Quite a straightforward question really. Question about the budget, so now then into a little bit of macro, fiscal policy in HS3. And then a bigger question, an evaluation question at the end, which was focusing on economic growth and development and whether there is or is not a relationship between the two. So that was June 2017. Let me, ladies and gentlemen, move this down and we'll look at June 2018. Okay, so here we have June 2018. So case study, let me say before we start, emphasis on this one, very much macro. So the previous one, housing, micro, this one very much macro. And the case study, interesting one, was on the Olympic Games in London and comparing that with an Olympic Games somewhere else, which escapes me at the minute, it doesn't matter. And then an odd sort of tie-on at the end, which was in relation to bicycle prices. So those of you who are into bicycles like myself will be interested in that. And just comparing that to the rate of inflation. Now the questions. So calculating. Remember to bring a calculator. A compare question. So another one of these compare questions. They always appear on this paper. Question on sustainable investment. So it was whether or not investment in the Olympics in London 2012, is that sustainable? So did it endure, or once the Olympics disappeared, did everything associated with it disappear as well, sort of the short-term benefits there? Impact on the Olympics, impact of the Olympics on the macro objectives, unemployment, growth, etc. Some stuff on exchange rates, and then a final evaluate question, which is on a personal favourite area of mine, on market structures, and this one was on oligopoly and consumer welfare. Lovely question. So having said all that, ladies and gentlemen, what now do we think, or what do I think, might be, and it's a best guess, might be on the paper in, what is it now, 2-3 weeks' time? Well, obviously, we're going to have our 30 multiple choice questions, as is the norm. So do have a look at those international board papers, work through those. You'll find the question papers and the mark schemes are there, and if you can do those, you'll nail the multi-choice on your own paper. So I'm hedging my bets here, ladies and gentlemen. We talk about hedging, don't we, in economics? Well, I'm doing that here because I don't know, because I don't have the inside line on this. I don't know if the emphasis is going to be micro or macro. Maybe once you've done your micro and macro papers, we'll come back to this and I'll try and push a video out just before the exam on that. But if the emphasis is micro, I'm thinking labour market, case study. Could be to do with wages, negotiation of wages. You could get a big question there on monopsony. So a single buyer of labour and that whole tug of war that goes on between the single buyer of labour and a single supplier of labour, such as happens with the British Medical Association and obviously the NHS being pretty much the sole employer. Or you might get something on commodity markets. So whilst we've seen obviously demand and supply with regard to housing, but nothing really. If you think about what's been happening to oil prices in recent times, it could be a very topical area to consider. We're trying to sort of put ourselves in the mind of the examiner, what might be topical for them and interesting for them to think about, so that's something worth considering. And then I would love it if this came up, ladies and gentlemen, something on market structures. We've had oligopoly, but we haven't had perfect competition, contestable markets, monopoly, monopolistic competition, duopoly. We have had none of that. So I would, as Kevin Keegan said, I would love it if something on market structures came up there. So that's micro. If it was macro emphasis, then I'm restricting this to just 2, ladies and gentlemen. I'm thinking maybe something on unemployment. We know that the UK unemployment number is now at an historic low level. Could be topical in the minds of whoever's written the paper. And so many things that you can obviously ask about unemployment, trade-offs on the Phillips curve, expectations augmented Phillips, long run, all this sort of thing. Or, what about international trade? Obviously at the moment we're seeing President Trump, President Xi Jinping in China at odds with one another. Might it be that, obviously it's too late now for something on that, but maybe something on international trade might appear, comparative advantage, all that sort of trade barriers, etc., so that could all appear. So, ladies and gentlemen, that's my thoughts on that. As I say, I do not have a crystal ball. I'm not Mystic Meg, Mystic Jaco. This is just my best guess as to what might appear. So I'll leave that with you to ponder over. I hope the revision's going well. Thank you for watching to the end of this video. If this is the first time you've watched one of my videos, do like, do subscribe. You can also find me on Twitter, G_economics. Instagram, Geconomics, LinkedIn, Geconomics, and obviously the website geconomics.co.uk up for a relaunch in a couple of weeks' time as well. Keep your eyes peeled for that one. So it's goodbye from me, and it's goodbye from the students. Goodbye.
Bye.
Goodbye.